I had heard stories of the station for years, whispers in forgotten forums, rumors travelers barely dared to speak aloud. They said it was abandoned, lost somewhere deep in the forest. I never believed them, until the night I decided to find it. The forest was silent, too silent. Every step I took on the dead leaves felt watched, as though the trees themselves were leaning closer, listening. Shadows stretched longer than they should, flickering in the fog, and I could swear I heard voices, faint, fleeting, calling my name, only to vanish when I turned. And then I saw it. Half swallowed by mist and darkness, the station emerged. Antennas reached upward like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. Cracked, grimy windows reflected the fading light, and the doors hung loosely, swaying slightly with the wind. A rusted sign creaked, swinging as if it wanted to warn me or invite me. The air smelled of old paper, burnt circuits, and something else, metallic, sweet, like blood mixed with smoke. I stepped inside. Dust swirled through the faint beams of light, and old equipment lay scattered across the floor. Wires snaked like black veins, and the silence pressed against me like a living thing. And then, it spoke. A voice, low and garbled, almost inhuman, cut through the quiet. My name, it hissed through the static of an old radio. My heart froze. There was no one there, nothing alive, and yet the voice came again, clearer this time, fragmented words clawing at my mind. The station, it was alive. Watching. Waiting. Lights flickered, revealing shapes at the edge of my vision, shadows moving just out of reach. A chair creaked across the floor though no one sat in it. Radio dials spun themselves. Buttons pressed and released on their own. Every sound, every shift of air felt deliberate, like the station itself was breathing around me, drawing me deeper into its heart. I wanted to leave, to run, but some pull held me, some hunger. The station had chosen me. And then, it spoke again. Clear. Terrifying. Words I should not have understood. Do you remember, the ones you left behind? I didn't, or at least I thought I didn't. And yet, somehow I did. The static rose into a roar, drowning everything. The forest, the station, even my own heartbeat, until silence fell. For a moment I thought it was over. But I knew it wasn't. No one who listens ever leaves unchanged. And I had just begun. I had barely caught my breath when the radio stirred again. At first, it was only static, a low, wavering hum that seemed almost alive, thrumming beneath the floorboards. And then a voice. Not my name this time, but something else. Something ancient, broken, echoing as if it had been buried for centuries. The words slithered across the air like cold fingers, brushing against my mind. I couldn't understand them, at first. But there was rhythm to it, a cadence that felt familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. I fumbled with the old equipment, turning knobs, pressing buttons, desperate to make sense of the broadcast. And then it happened, a single, clear sentence, almost a whisper. We have been waiting. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. The voice was coming through the speaker, but it wasn't speaking to me alone. I felt it reaching into the forest outside, into the very night. It was alive, conscious, and it knew I was listening. I tried to speak into the microphone, half joking, half curious, asking, Who is this? The air shifted. The static rose, crackling violently, and then, it answered. Not in words I recognized, but in voices I knew. Old friends, long-gone relatives, voices that should have been silent. My heart thumped so hard I thought it might tear through my chest. They spoke to me, yet not to me, as if the radio had found a way to reach beyond the grave. Shadows twisted around the station, stretching toward me. The temperature dropped sharply, and my breath formed misty clouds before my face. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my bones as though the station itself was alive. And then the messages became personal. Names, events, secrets I had never told anyone, and I knew, this place, this radio had been listening, always. Every broadcast brought more. Snippets of conversations I had never had. Places I had never been. Faces I didn't recognize, yet somehow remembered. My sanity began to wobble on a knife's edge. The station didn't just speak to the dead, it spoke through the dead. Every voice, every whisper carved itself into my mind, and I realized I could never leave this place unchanged. The climax of that night came suddenly. A phrase, clear and commanding, reverberated through the forest and the station alike. Do you wish to join us? And for a brief, terrifying moment, the voices fell silent. I was alone, or so I thought. The station pulsed like a heartbeat, waiting, knowing I would not leave until I understood the terrible truth it had to show me. And in that silence I understood. The radio had begun its story. My story. And the dead were not done speaking. I thought I had seen the limits of the station's power, but I was wrong. The static on the radio thickened, vibrating through the floor, through the walls, through me. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, a voice called. Not my name this time. Something older. Something forgotten. A voice from beyond, low and rasping, echoing like it had crawled from a grave untouched for centuries. And then another. And another. Hundreds of voices layered over one another, overlapping, murmuring, whispering secrets in tongues I could almost understand, yet not entirely. I tried to turn the knobs, tried to cut the power, tried to leave, but the station would not allow it. The radio hummed, alive, pulsing like a heartbeat, and the voices swirled through the room like smoke. They knew me. They knew me. They whispered the names of people I had known, people I had lost, things I had buried deep in my mind. And then it spoke, directly. A single sentence, calm, deliberate, but carrying the weight of the grave. We have been waiting for you. I froze. The forest outside seemed to shift, the shadows deepening, stretching unnaturally. A cold gust slammed the door shut, and I realized that escape was no longer an option. The dead had chosen me. They had spoken through the radio, but now, they would reach for me, reach through the wires, the speakers, the air itself. I whispered, What do you want? The voices swirled faster, overlapping, discordant, almost overwhelming. And then, as if one mind spoke through all of them, the words came, to remember, to be heard, to bring you home. My heart pounded. The home they spoke of was not a place of warmth or comfort. It was a grave, and I could feel it. Cold, oppressive, inescapable. I could see shapes now. Faint, flickering like smoke figures at the edges of my vision. They moved closer with every phrase from the radio. Whispers turned into faint calls, soft footsteps that did not belong to me. I stumbled, trying to comprehend how something so dead could move with such purpose, such intent. The hum of the station grew louder, resonating through my bones, vibrating my chest, forcing my chest to rise and fall with it. Hours passed, or minutes. I could not tell. Time had stopped, warped by the voices. The dead were patient, relentless, testing me. Every attempt to speak, to respond, was answered with new revelations. Secrets I had never shared, thoughts I had not voiced, fears I had never dared admit. The radio had become a conduit, a bridge, a trap. And it was alive. At one point, the voices became coherent. They spoke in my own voice, mimicking me, twisting my words, answering questions I had not asked. I realized then that this was not just a station. It was a place where the living and the dead overlapped. Where reality bent under the weight of memory, grief, and unspoken horrors. The station was not haunted, it was hungry. And it was feeding. The climax of the first contact came suddenly. I heard laughter, low, chilling, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Then one voice, clear, resonant, commanding, broke through. You cannot leave. Not yet. We have stories to tell. And you will listen. The hum rose, static roared, and I felt hands, cold, spectral, brush against me. I staggered, falling to the floor, and the voices began to chant in unison. Names of the dead, names I knew, names I feared. And they were calling me, beckoning me closer to the radio, closer to something. I spent what felt like eternity in that room, paralyzed with fear, yet drawn by an impossible curiosity. Every sound, every whisper, every flicker of the lights forced me to listen, to hear. And with every passing moment I understood the truth. The dead were not just speaking. They were teaching, warning, corrupting. And I had no choice but to obey. By the time dawn threatened the forest outside, the voices had receded slightly, leaving only a soft, sinister hum. But I knew, the dead were still there, waiting, speaking, planning. And I could not leave. I had crossed the threshold. I had answered the call. And the radio was only just beginning to tell its story. The sun had long abandoned the forest, leaving only shadows stretching like frozen fingers across the undergrowth. I could still hear the hum of the station vibrating beneath my feet, low, insistent, alive. The radio whispered constantly now, a chorus of voices, some pleading, some angry, some utterly alien. Every word cut into my mind, each phrase carrying the weight of the grave. I tried to leave, I really did. but the doors slammed shut before I could even reach them. The windows rattled violently, shadows pressing against the glass like hands reaching for escape. And then I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, pacing around me. Not mine. Not human. I tried to call out, but my voice seemed to vanish before it reached my ears. The station had swallowed my courage, my control, my very essence. The radio began speaking in a new tone, low and commanding, as if multiple beings spoke through it simultaneously. Names of people I had never met, yet somehow remembered, echoed through the room. Each syllable a dagger of memory, a chilling reminder that the dead were not just communicating, they were manipulating. I could feel my own thoughts twisting, bending to their rhythm, my mind entwined with theirs, helpless and unwilling. And then the room shifted. Furniture moved without reason. Chairs tilted, tables scraped across the floor, and shadows danced along the walls with no source of light. I saw shapes in the corners, tall, thin, with eyes that gleamed faintly in the darkness, watching, waiting. They were not fully there, yet fully present, a dreadful reminder that the station existed in a place where reality had no boundaries. The static roared louder. The radio pulsed, almost like a heartbeat, vibrating through the floor and into my chest. It spoke to me directly now, words I could understand, words meant only for me. The others will come. Do you hear them? They are near. And I did hear them. The forest seemed alive with whispers, footfalls, and the low groan of things that had long been buried. My skin crawled as the temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the equipment. My breath hung like smoke. The shadows pressed closer, and the whispers grew louder, repeating the same chilling phrase over and over. Join us, join us, join us. I stumbled to the radio, powerless to resist, drawn as if by an invisible cord that threaded straight into my chest, into my very soul. I tried to look away. I tried to resist. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Faces of the dead, pale and distorted, staring at me with hollow, accusing eyes. They moved closer with each heartbeat, their whispers filling the room, drowning the rational world, until I could no longer distinguish my own thoughts from theirs. Time had no meaning here. Minutes, hours, days, I could not tell. The voices carried on endlessly, telling stories of lives ended, of betrayals, of rituals long forgotten. And then the dead began to interact with the room itself. Equipment cracked and sparked, the walls shivered. Faint hands brushed against me, pulling, tugging, urging me toward the center of the station, where the radio sat glowing faintly, humming with anticipation. And through it all, the radio spoke one final bone-chilling sentence. You cannot leave. Not now. Not ever. Listen. Learn. Remember. My mind quaked. My heart pounded. And I understood. I was no longer a visitor. I was part of it now. A piece of its story. The dead had chosen me. And I had no choice but to stay, to witness, to endure the horror that would follow. The voices had grown louder, more insistent, more commanding. Every broadcast from the radio was a message I could not ignore. And yet, I did. I told myself it was curiosity, bravery, perhaps foolishness. I told myself that I would learn, that I would uncover the truth behind the whispers, the shadows, the voices that clawed at the edges of my mind. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was trapped, and I did not yet understand the chains that bound me here. The station pulsed with life, the radio humming like a heartbeat in the darkness. And then it spoke, clear, deliberate, chilling in its certainty. Leave, now, before it is too late. My hands shook. My breath caught. Every instinct screamed to obey. The shadows pressed closer, the whispers more urgent. But I did not move. I stayed, transfixed, my curiosity like a knife twisted into my soul. The first warning came subtly. A gust of icy air blew through the station, rattling the old equipment. A chair tipped over on its own, and the static rose, forming words in the air that were almost visible, flickering like a broken hologram. Do not stay, they are watching. My mind fought to comprehend, but the rational world had long abandoned me. The station had taken over, and I was now a participant in its story. I tried to reason with myself. Perhaps it was all mechanical failures, perhaps the forest played tricks on my mind. But then came the voices, not whispers now, but clear, accusatory, angry. They spoke in my own voice, mocking me, repeating my doubts, my fears, the secrets I had buried deep. The radio pulsed with each word, each syllable cutting through me, shaking the walls, the floor, the very air I breathed. And then the warning escalated. Not a whisper, not static, but a scream. The voices joined together, forming a chorus that was both human and inhuman. Leave. Now. Or join us. The shadows in the corners of the room convulsed, twisting into shapes that defied explanation. I could feel them crawling closer as if the very air itself had teeth. The floor vibrated beneath my feet, the walls quivered, and the radio's glow intensified, bathing the room in an otherworldly, sickly light. But I did not leave. Foolishly, arrogantly I stayed. My curiosity demanded answers. I reached for the radio, desperate to hear more, desperate to understand. And the dead responded. Their voices merged into a single, terrifying sentence. So you have chosen, so you shall remain. A hand, icy cold, brushed my shoulder. Another wrapped around my ankle. I stumbled but could not escape. The station had claimed me, binding me to its story, to its power. Hours passed. Minutes passed. I could not tell the difference. The whispers, the voices, the laughter, the screams, they merged into one endless sound, a symphony of the dead. I felt my mind stretch, my consciousness blur, my soul tethered to the station as the dead whispered secrets too horrible to comprehend. And yet, even in that terror, a part of me craved more, craved to know what lay beyond the warnings I had ignored. And so the radio continued, pulsing, humming, alive, while I sat frozen, listening. The warnings had been clear and I had ignored them. And in doing so, I had crossed the threshold. There was no going back. The dead were patient, but now they were angry. And I had invited them in. The night had grown older, and the forest outside the station seemed to pulse with life of its own. The radio had claimed me fully now, its hum resonating through my bones, through my chest, through my very thoughts. But amidst the terror, a question clawed at me. What was this place? Why had it chosen me? Why had it whispered my name and the names of the dead? I began to explore, cautiously, each room of the station, revealing more of its secrets. Old papers lay scattered, brittle with age. Photographs of people I did not recognize, yet whose eyes seemed to follow me, stared from faded frames. Maps covered in strange symbols, calendars marked with dates long past, devices I could not identify, all spoke of experiments, rituals, and a purpose I could not yet comprehend. And the radio, it spoke constantly, guiding me, warning me, tempting me. It whispered in tongues long forgotten, words that bent my mind, words that carried history and death in their cadence. It told of a time before memory, of those who had built this place, of a cult, a government experiment, or perhaps something older than humanity itself. The details were fragmented, scattered across whispers and echoes, but the intent was clear. This station was a bridge. A bridge between the living and the dead, between worlds, between dimensions. I tried to document, to write, to record, but every attempt was met with interference. Pens broke, pages tore, recordings distorted into static and whispers. The station did not want to be understood, not fully. It wanted me to feel, to experience, to fear. And I did. Every sound, every flicker of shadow, every pulse of the radio deepened my understanding of the horror I had entered. Then the dead began to intervene more directly. Apparitions appeared, faint at first, like smoke, but growing sharper with each passing hour. They whispered secrets, tragedies, betrayals, deaths that had been hidden, crimes that had been ignored, their voices carrying the weight of eternity. And sometimes I could feel them touch me, cold fingers grazing my skin, drawing me toward the center of the station, toward the radio that pulsed like a heartbeat of the void. I discovered an old logbook, its pages filled with scribbles, diagrams, and warnings. Some entries were mundane, schedules, frequencies, names, but others were terrifying. Instructions for communication, rituals to summon, to hear, to bind. A repeated phrase appeared over and over: do not interfere. Do not listen. Do not remain. I laughed bitterly, knowing full well I had ignored every warning. The deeper I looked, the more the station revealed itself, and the more it revealed, the more the dead pressed closer, feeding on my terror. The hum of the radio shifted suddenly, becoming almost melodic, almost hypnotic, and then a single voice, calm and commanding, spoke directly to me. You see now. You understand nothing, yet you know enough. The bridge is open. And the others are coming. And I felt it. A presence beyond comprehension. Shapes moving in the darkness outside the station. Whispers carried on the wind. faint groans and shuffles as if a parade of the dead circled just beyond sight. Fear and fascination battled inside me. I wanted to flee, but my legs refused. I wanted to turn away, but my eyes were drawn irresistibly to the radio, glowing faintly, pulsing with life, with intent, with a hunger older than the forest, older than the mountains, older than humanity itself. And then it spoke again, layering voices over one another. You are part of this now. The stories, the memories, the forgotten, they belong to you and you belong to them. Hours became unmeasurable. I lost track of time. My own thoughts blurred into the whispers, my memories merged with those of the dead. And in the silence between words, I realized the horrifying truth. I was not investigating the station. The station was investigating me. Every secret it revealed, every shadow it cast, every ghostly touch was a question. And every answer tightened its grip on my mind. I understood then that the radio was not just a machine. It was a living conduit, an intelligence older than comprehension, channeling the dead, twisting reality, bending time and space, and it had chosen me, to listen, to witness, to suffer, and perhaps to become. The station's mysteries deepened with every second I remained, and I knew, with a chill that froze my soul, that there was no escape from the knowledge it demanded I hold. The night had grown older, and the forest outside the station seemed to pulse with life of its own. The radio had claimed me fully now, its hum resonating through my bones, through my chest, through my very thoughts. But amidst the terror, a question clawed at me. What was this place? Why had it chosen me? Why had it whispered my name and the names of the dead? I began to explore, cautiously, each room of the station, revealing more of its secrets. Old papers lay scattered, brittle with age. Photographs of people I did not recognize, yet whose eyes seemed to follow me, stared from faded frames. Maps covered in strange symbols, calendars marked with dates long past, devices I could not identify, all spoke of experiments, rituals, and a purpose I could not yet comprehend. And the radio, it spoke constantly, guiding me, warning me, tempting me. It whispered in tongues long forgotten, words that bent my mind, words that carried history and death in their cadence. It told of a time before memory, of those who had built this place, of a cult, a government experiment, or perhaps something older than humanity itself. The details were fragmented, scattered across whispers and echoes, but the intent was clear. This station was a bridge. A bridge between the living and the dead, between worlds, between dimensions. I tried to document, to write, to record, but every attempt was met with interference. Pens broke, pages tore, recordings distorted into static and whispers. The station did not want to be understood, not fully. It wanted me to feel, to experience, to fear. And I did. Every sound, every flicker of shadow, every pulse of the radio deepened my understanding of the horror I had entered. Then the dead began to intervene more directly. Apparitions appeared, faint at first, like smoke, but growing sharper with each passing hour. They whispered secrets, tragedies, betrayals, deaths that had been hidden, crimes that had been ignored, their voices carrying the weight of eternity. And sometimes I could feel them touch me, cold fingers grazing my skin, drawing me toward the center of the station, toward the radio that pulsed like a heartbeat of the void. I discovered an old logbook, its pages filled with scribbles, diagrams, and warnings. Some entries were mundane, schedules, frequencies, names, but others were terrifying. Instructions for communication, rituals to summon, to hear, to bind. A repeated phrase appeared over and over: do not interfere. Do not listen. Do not remain. I laughed bitterly, knowing full well I had ignored every warning. The deeper I looked, the more the station revealed itself, and the more it revealed, the more the dead pressed closer, feeding on my terror. The hum of the radio shifted suddenly, becoming almost melodic, almost hypnotic, and then a single voice, calm and commanding, spoke directly to me. You see now. You understand nothing, yet you know enough. The bridge is open. And the others are coming. And I felt it. A presence beyond comprehension. Shapes moving in the darkness outside the station. Whispers carried on the wind, faint groans and shuffles as if a parade of the dead circled just beyond sight. Fear and fascination battled inside me. I wanted to flee, but my legs refused. I wanted to turn away, but my eyes were drawn irresistibly to the radio, glowing faintly, pulsing with life, with intent, with a hunger older than the forest, older than the mountains, older than humanity itself. And then it spoke again, layering voices over one another. You are part of this now. The stories, the memories, the forgotten, they belong to you and you belong to them. Hours became unmeasurable. I lost track of time. My own thoughts blurred into the whispers, my memories merged with those of the dead. And in the silence between words, I realized the horrifying truth. I was not investigating the station. The station was investigating me. Every secret it revealed, every shadow it cast, every ghostly touch was a question. And every answer tightened its grip on my mind. I understood then that the radio was not just a machine. It was a living conduit, an intelligence older than comprehension, channeling the dead, twisting reality, bending time and space, and it had chosen me, to listen, to witness, to suffer, and perhaps to become. The station's mysteries deepened with every second I remained, and I knew, with a chill that froze my soul, that there was no escape from the knowledge it demanded I hold. The station had awakened fully. Every shadow stretched unnaturally, twisting like smoke in a storm. The radio pulsed violently, glowing an unnatural greenish red that burned through the darkness. The voices were everywhere, surrounding me, inside me, tearing at the edges of my mind. Each word they spoke carried weight, pain, anger, longing. They were not just speaking, they were demanding. I could feel the station moving with me as if it were alive, breathing, sensing my fear, shaping the reality around me. The floor shifted beneath my feet, the walls pulsed like muscles. I stumbled, trying to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping me in a cocoon of terror. Then came the cold, the freezing, choking cold that seeped into my bones, curling around my heart and lungs, wrapping me in a silent scream. The shadows now had form. Faces, twisted and hollow, appeared within them. Hands reached for me, clawed at me, brushing my skin with icy precision. I screamed, but the sound was absorbed, swallowed by the hum of the radio and the chorus of voices chanting, whispering, laughing. I could no longer tell which were real, which were echoes, and which were simply in my mind. And then the radio spoke directly, clearly, with a power that shook the room. You were warned. You were chosen. Now witness. The room seemed to bend, the ceiling stretching upward, the floor sinking downward. Objects morphed into grotesque forms, faces appearing in the wood, the walls, the dust. I could see the dead moving in unison, converging toward the radio, their whispers coalescing into one overwhelming scream. Join you or be forgotten. I stumbled forward, my hands reaching out, drawn against my will to the heart of the station. The glow of the radio flared, searing my vision, and I felt someone, grasp my soul. I struggled, screamed in silence, my mind fracturing under the weight of the dead's presence. Memories not my own flooded my thoughts. Betrayals, murders, tragedies that had long been buried, all whispering to me, demanding acknowledgement, demanding witness. The station seemed to breathe around me, pulsing, living, consuming. The voices layered over one another, forming a crescendo of horror that shook the walls and rattled my very bones. Faces, dozens of them, appeared around the radio, eyes empty, mouths open in silent screams, reaching, begging, threatening. I felt myself becoming part of the story, part of the bridge between worlds that this station had always been. And then silence. Abrupt. Total. My chest heaving, eyes straining against the fading glow, I realized the dead had paused, testing me, observing me, their presence still palpable. The radio's hum softened, but I knew this was temporary. The climax was not over. The dead had revealed their power, their hunger, their intent. I had survived, but only barely. The station's heart still pulsed, still waited, still called. In that pause, I understood the terrible truth. The station, the radio, the dead, they were eternal. They had chosen me to witness, to endure, to remember. And I was not yet free. Not yet. The climax had passed, but the story, the terror, was far from over. The dead were patient, and I would have to endure the lingering fear. The storm had passed, or perhaps it had simply shifted. The radio's hum was low now, almost gentle, but the weight of what had occurred pressed down on me like stone. The dead had shown themselves, had tested me, had pulled at the very fabric of my mind, and now they lingered in the edges of perception, patient, waiting, eternal. I moved through the station, the silence almost unbearable. Shadows no longer twisted violently, but they lingered, subtle, watching, reminders that what had happened would not be forgotten. The radio sat in the center of the room, still glowing faintly, pulsing softly, as if it breathed with the echoes of those it had summoned. I tried to leave. My legs moved as if they were my own, but my mind knew I would carry this place with me forever. Every whisper, every shadow, every touch of cold that had brushed my skin now lived inside me. The dead had imprinted their presence on my soul. And I knew the terrible truth. The station did not release what it claimed, and the bridge remained open even if I walked away. The forest outside was quiet, deceptively calm, yet I could hear faint whispers carried on the wind, reminders of the voices that had filled the station. I felt them in the corners of my vision, in the stillness of the night, in the pulse of my own heartbeat. The radio had taught me fear, patience, and inevitability. And the dead had learned that I had listened. I glanced back once, toward the station, toward the glowing pulse of the radio. It seemed to watch me, almost sentient, almost pleased. And I realized that the story was not over. The station, the dead, the whispers, they would remain. They had claimed a part of me, and I had claimed a part of them. The boundary between life and death had shifted, imperceptibly, irrevocably. And so I walked away, yet I could still hear them. The faint hum of the radio, the whispers just at the edge of understanding, the lingering fear that would never let me be. I knew, with a chill that would follow me for the rest of my days, that the dead were patient and they would wait. Always. And one day, they would call again.